Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. I am a love and dating coach, an acupuncturist, a guy just trying to figure it all out. So I am very excited about this episode because the response to the When Ghosts Speak on Love was so great. You guys were so kind and gracious in your feedback and support and encouragement. So I want to keep that going. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about the next part of the download that happened of when I was channeling or opening my consciousness or connecting to something. I don't know what it was, but it felt very powerful. And there were several instances over the course of a couple of months where I felt like I was having these conversations with these deities or guides or whatever. And so rather than waiting for a book that may never get published, I thought I might as well just start sharing it here. And that first episode, When Ghosts Speak on Love, you guys seem to really like and enjoy. And so this next one, what I talk about in this episode is a continuation of that, and I'm going to break down some of the things that they talk about, give you a little more context, because some of it gets to be pretty specific. So I'm really excited to be sharing this work with you guys. I'm so glad that you're here. You can check me out on Instagram at James E. Rohr. Shoot an email over to the podcast at pleasurepointspodcast@gmail.com. And of course, if you are struggling with love or you need some help with your dating relationship life, you can check out all of my work there on invitinginlove.com. Watch the masterclass, book a call if you want, and we will get you clear on the next steps that you need to take in order to attract that amazing partner into your life. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy this next installment of When Ghosts Speak on Love. All right, so at the end of the last episode where I was speaking to my friend Ross, we were talking about acupuncture school, and I mentioned a story that I'll recap here very briefly because it's very relevant to what the messages were that I received in this part of the download. And what happened early on in my career was, in my acupuncture career, is I remember the first time it happened, I was sitting in the room and this patient walked in, and when I looked at her, all of a sudden there were points that seemed to light up on her body. She started kind of glowing like a Christmas tree. And I noticed the pattern of the points and, which acupuncture points it was. And then I didn't do anything with it because I was fresh out of school. I was working in this major hospital institution, and all of the points, it didn't make sense to me. So it wasn't consistent with what I had learned in school. So I tried to ignore it. And over the next month or so, when the patient kept coming in, I would see these same points glowing. And it also happened that I would see it on some other points, on some other patients as well too, where they would walk in and they would just start glowing. And it wasn't always the same configuration of points. There was some variability based on who the patient was. But every time that it happened, I would cross-reference it with what my education had been, and I couldn't find any correlation. I couldn't find any consistency in the type of points or the focus of the treatment or any of that stuff. So as it kept happening, eventually I just said, well, screw it. I might as well just needle these points. So I started doing that. And the feedback was pretty universal, that people felt that those treatments were the best ones they'd ever had. They'd felt things open. There was a break in whatever kind of ongoing pattern that they had had. And so it was having this kind of profound impact. And I started noticing, as this kept happening with not all of my patients, but some of my patients, I started noticing that there seemed to be some like shapes that were being formed with the needles, diamonds and triangles and sometimes circles. There was these different kind of geometric patterns that were happening. And then because the universe is so great, it happened. I was on vacation shortly after this had started happening, and I ran into a friend of mine. I was hanging out with a friend of mine from acupuncture school, and we were at her place, and I noticed that she had this book called Esoteric Acupuncture, which is a book that I had never seen nor heard of before. And as I was flipping through it, the guy had a lot of graphs and charts, and he had pictures and diagrams of the same point prescriptions that I had seen on my clients. Some were like almost exactly identical to where it was like crazy. You would have thought that I'd read the book and been studying with this guy. And so the fact that we had, I had come to a similar insight or been gifted or been able to see what this guy had been seeing in his own clinical experience was so cool. Because I don't really like to study a bunch of stuff. I like to go out and have my own firsthand experience when possible and then sort it out afterwards. And that's definitely what happened here with this sacred geometry or esoteric acupuncture that was happening. And it was just such a remarkable experience. And I'm starting with this because in the download that I'm going to share with you here, they mentioned a lot of this stuff. So we're going to be talking a lot about this idea of sacred geometry. And if you don't know what sacred geometry is, don't worry. I didn't know either. And it's something that there's a variety of beliefs, and as I was preparing for the podcast and doing research over the years on this stuff, it can take you into a lot of different wormholes and all sorts of places. But basically, the idea is that sacred geometry really centers on the belief that there are certain shapes in nature, and due to their inherent perfection, hold the key to understanding the universe. So there's this great article on grunge.com actually that gets into this stuff. So this idea that by observing nature and by paying attention to the geometry, the geometric patterns that are found there, we might be able to have a greater understanding or connection with God or the universe. And we know that this kind of sacred geometry has been used by the Masonic builders, so this can get you into like all sorts of Freemason wormholes. But when we look at these ancient cathedrals and the pyramids and even the stone monuments like Stonehenge, and I think even some of the stuff in South America and Peru and possibly even Easter Island, that there's the reality that these ancient builders had knowledge of very, very precise mathematics. Where they got that knowledge is a whole other topic to get into. What kind of information did they have? Were there aliens? Were there ancient technologies? But this idea that early people were primitive is one that we just absolutely have to get rid of, because, look at the pyramids. We can't even recreate the pyramids now. And with their knowledge of ley lines, sun lines, the astronomical stuff, the geometrical configurations, like all that, it's so impressive. So when we start talking about sacred geometry, it's all these things are going to encompass the idea that within these geometric forms and the symbols, right, there might even be hidden messages that can be unlocked. And that's where this is where the sacred geometry stuff starts to expand out beyond just, what are the patterns that you're seeing. But when we look at the hieroglyphs and when we look at, some of the stuff that might be in the Masonic and the Freemasons and what they built and the structures of the cathedrals and all of that, it can be unpacked and unpacked and unpacked. It's like, I think that book, The Da Vinci Code, talked a lot about some of these things. And, all of that wormhole is there should you want to dive into it. I think the point that's going to be relevant to the download here is, I found this great description of it where they say, we're introduced to this fundamental idea at the heart of sacred geometry, which is that it was provided the means by which God, as the great architect of the universe, was able to frame the template of creation, to which the study of geometry provided the key and the means to render visible that which is concealed from the undiscerning and untrained eye, and that these fundamental geometric relations, manifested through form, pattern, and number, form the very basis of harmony. And so the download that I'm about to share is all talking about restoring this connection to harmony and to the heart. And so I find that this kind of the overlap or their focus and emphasis on geometry is really fascinating. There's a quote by Galileo where he says, "Mathematics is the alphabet with which God has written the universe." And Kepler said, "Geometry existed before the creation. It is the co-eternal with the mind of God, and geometry provided God with a model for the creation." And there's this other one, this other quote from a Freemason's guide, apparently, that says, geometry is an exact science. It leaves nothing to chance. It can prove everything it teaches. It's precise. It is definite. By it, we buy and sell our land, navigate our ships on the pathless ocean, foretell eclipses and measure time. All science rests upon mathematics, and mathematics is first and last. Geometry, whether we call its extension trigonometry or differential calculus or any other name. Geometry is the ultimate fact that we have won out of a puzzling nature. There are no ultimate facts of which the human mind can take cognizance, which are more certain, more fundamental than the facts of geometry. And one of the things that I found fascinating is this book that I mentioned earlier called The Raw Material. It's these people that got together and they were channeling one of the builders of the pyramids, or this kind of collective that they know as Ra. And one of the things that I found so fascinating in the exchange that they were having with this entity is the precision to which the entity wanted them to arrange certain a book and a glass of water and the orientation of the table. It was like very, very, very precise. And that seemed to make a difference to the health of the woman who was able to channel and the channel's ability to connect and to use her in a good and healthy and sustainable way. And so, this kind of idea of precision along with this attention to geometry, I find to be very, very fascinating, especially as it related to what I was seeing in those early days of in my practice, how I was being shown these geometric shapes and patterns as important points to hit for healing. So let's get into the download. So what they were saying here was, it just started like this. They said, let's talk about healing for a bit. We cannot overstate the importance of triangles. This is one of the most universal symbols, and your acupuncture points are a great reference. When the heart is unable to see and feel love, triangles are the way back. End quote there. So I read that now and I'm like, triangles are the way back? Like, holy shit, what is happening here? And we found some quotes, this one mystic said the triangle is the esoteric symbol of the Buddha. And then there's this other guy who, R. Buckminster Fuller, who was one of these pioneers of sacred geometry and looking at the geometric patterns of the universe. And he says that the triangles are the strongest shape known to man. And a triangle in a 3D shape is a pyramid. It's a tetrahedron. And so when we start looking at this idea of using triangles, of using geometry, it's a process of really aligning one's heart, mind, and spirit to source. And it seems to be that this geometry is, and seeing it as sacred, seeing a triangle as a potential gateway to access to the sacred, it's an opportunity to connect the physical with the spiritual. It seems to be this kind of reaching out of the dense matter into the more etheric realms, which is what we're meant to do. And the stability of that triangle or of the pyramid, it makes sense as a shape because it's got that clear point that can rise up and transmit the energy down to the base and vice versa. And so, like, for a symbol or a shape to be a vehicle for transcendence, that best bet could very well be the triangle. And that seems to be what was coming through and implied in the download here. And what I love about it in thinking about some of the sacred geometry is that there's it's not tied to a culture. It's not tied to a language barrier. It's just math. And it's this geometric patterns. It is that universal language. And it's like nature's constant. So they go on to say, the flow of energy in the body is critical, especially the heart. Your heart exudes an energy field way greater than your current science recognizes. If there's a reason trauma messes up so many people, it's that the heart stops being the emperor or the empress. The other energies in the body step in and assert their will to keep that kingdom from crumbling. But the emperor or the empress must be restored. And two of the most important triangles that can be formed in the body are formed by a combination of the acupuncture point Ren 17 with kidney 26. And the other one they say is Ren 14 and the point lung 2. So if you're an acupuncturist, you're going to know what that is. And if you're not, let me explain it to you. So the first one, Ren 17, is a point that's in the middle of the upper chest, in between, it's like level with the fourth intercostal space. Basically, where you would think of is like the center of your heart, in the midline of the body, or the front of that heart chakra is going to be Ren 17. And this is a point that is said to govern both the lungs and the heart. And in this download, they liked it paired with the point kidney 26, which is a little bit higher up. It's closer to the collarbone, and it's a little bit wider out from the midline. It's a couple of inches from the center, in between like where your nipples are and the center of the chest. If you were to split that distance a little bit higher up, so it's going to make this triangle here. And kidney 26 is a great point. Its name, the other name for it beyond kidney 26, is called amid elegans. And there's a great acupuncturist author who talks about it, and he says that this point is used to remove the tarnish. His name is Lonnie Jarrett. It says to remove the tarnish from our original nature. So this is a point where we have this essence of the energy that you're born with, along with your unique spirit. And this is a point where we receive the energy of the heaven, where it combines with your unique destiny. So living in elegance, being amid elegance here, means that you've navigated the challenge of the earth in a good way. And that with shock and trauma, the energy can become blocked here. And so it's hard to live a good life. It's hard to receive the elegance of the heavens here and to connect it to the heart. And so it was awesome that in this energy that I was feeling, that they suggested that this is a great triangle to start using, a great point sequence to help to restore that life of elegance and to connect the heart and the lungs together. The other one that they talk about is going to be Ren 14 with lung 2. So Ren 14 is going to be a little bit lower down, almost kind of at the top of that solar plexus chakra. So a little bit closer to the belly button from Ren 17. So you're going to go down the midline a little bit. And this is an interesting point that they chose because it's between the solar plexus chakra and the heart chakra. It's known as the front move of the heart. So Chinese medicine knows that this point has a lot to do with the heart. Lung 2 is a point that's known as the cloud gate. And this is a point that Lonnie Jarrett talks about as a point that's said to clear grief that obscures the heart. And so when we have a lot of grief in the body, we can fail to contact the essence of ourselves because we're always anticipating loss. And when you feel empty and you reject the greater value of life that's afforded to us, when we reject that internally and externally, the cloud of grief can manifest. And this can look like phlegm, a chronic cough, sinus drainage. These are all what he says, the embodiment of grief as internal tears. And so lung 2 is a point that's powerful to resolve grief and to allow your heart's intention to shine. Oh, lung 2 is going to be closer to the shoulder, kind of right off the anterior deltoid on the far edge of the chest as you're moving away from the midline closer to the shoulder. So this is going to be a much bigger and wider triangle that's formed here. And it's just, I don't know, it's fucking rad because it's consistent with some of the triangles and stuff that I was seeing earlier when I was younger in my practice. And so to have this be revisited and their assertion that the triangles are so important is great. And we're going to see that it's a little bit later on, it gets like really intense, the role of these triangles. All right, so they're going to continue on, and they say, When you need structure and order, come back to the triangles. They're magnifiers, just like crystals. They send the signal of order, of a landing place for your soul to return home to the body. Keep stacking triangles on triangles to restore harmony. This is the old way. This is why the pyramids are shaped the way they are. And they continue on and say, the transfiguration of energy into geometric symbols. When looking to pack a bunch of information into a small nugget of information, shapes are far better than linear words. There will come a time again when language will be simplified and more nuanced with the introduction of more shapes and symbols. When you add the harmonics to a shape, you can have both the original meaning and higher frequency meanings, but this will require a greater attention to detail than is currently valued. And we've talked about triangles, specifically triangles over the heart. So imagine that your heart is a triangle that points down, where the base is parallel to the collarbone. Now imagine those sides going up from the point extending beyond the physical body, running almost parallel to your neck muscles. And now two other lines all converging at the tip, but running more in front of the body and behind, almost parallel to the nose and the back of the head. Now imagine a new square base formed between these lines, making a pyramid, where the base is about 2 feet above the top of your head. Inside this base is a circle that gently touches the edges equidistant from the center. When the crown chakra is open, when you're ready to receive, your heart, throat, and third eye become the inside of this pyramid temple. The downloads will come in like a wand that stirs the circle in the base, forming a spiral of energy that flows down to the heart tip. The pyramid synthesizes this information. Disease can happen when the information doesn't move. In health, as the heart ultimately shifts to hold the energy that was downloaded, a single beam of energy is then sent to the top of the pyramid tip at that point, Ren 14, where that energy then enters into another smaller pyramid that branches out from Ren 14 and goes down through the hips, belly, and lower abdomen, where it can spread out and reprogram the body's base circular energy. And as the integration becomes complete, the two pyramidal structures communicate with each other until expression is given to the work and it can live for the current place and time. End quote. What? I was like, holy shit, what is happening here? So it gets a little complicated with the description, but basically what it seems like is, imagine that point, Ren 14, like in the top of that solar plexus chakra, and the two tips there. So you've got a pyramid that's going to shoot up at the top of the head, and then a little smaller pyramid that's going to shoot down from the bottom, where you've got a wider base at the kind of at the pelvic floor. Think about it, your root chakra, and then you've got another base at the top of your head. And we've got these two triangular pyramidal shapes that are going to be able to be in communication with each other. So my encouragement based on this is for you guys to play with those images. Think about using the triangles, and let's see what happens. I'd love to hear more about what your experience is like, if you have any meditations or your other experience with the triangles and any of the sacred geometry stuff. But I want to finish with the last part of this download, which just has completely blown my mind, where they start talking about the sign of the cross. So here we go with this. So they say, okay, quote, here we are again with the triangles. The sign of the cross, my words now, like, that we use in Catholicism, all right? Back to the text. The sign of the cross, it isn't a cross as much as it is a diamond. two pyramids on top of each other. When you're tapping the third eye point, and then down to Ren 14, and then over to the acupuncture point, lung 1 on each side, which is like a little bit, it's close to lung 2 on the edge of the chest. All right, they say that this tapping of lung 1 is important because it's the entry point of the Po, the spirit of this existence. They say we taught it to your earlier Chinese masters and talk about the Po. So lung 1, this is going to be my interpretation based on what they told me to tell you guys. Lung 1, central treasury is what it's called. This is the important entry point into the lung meridian. So the flow of qi will move from the liver to the lung. And it's the connection between the inner virtue of aspiration and the inspiration of heaven. So what this means here is that the entry point of the lung meridian is your breath is going to join the heaven within and the heaven outside of you. And this is where your potential meets the potential of nature, the most essential essence from nature. And it's the lungs that are responsible to bringing in that air to create and manifest that vital chi. And what we know is that a child, right, when there's early trauma, oftentimes their heart energy is going to get stuck and the breathing can become compromised. And so activating this point, lung 1, this guy Lonnie Jarrett, he talks about it. Lung 1 is like taking someone up to the top of a mountain where the air is clear and the most refined chi is available to inspire him. And in Chinese medicine, they talk about how the body's soul, the soul experience is broken down into different types of energy. And in the lungs is where this Po resides. And so in the download, when they're talking about the tapping of lung 1, it's important because this is where the Po lives. The Po is basically the spirit of the body that lives in the lungs. And the Po is this idea of the soul that is related to this particular incarnation. So when you die, other parts of your soul might continue, but the Po does not. It doesn't survive death. This is the part of you that is so uniquely human. It's so unique to this particular incarnation. And that when you die, this stays with the body. This does not move on. And so it's fascinating here that when they start talking about making the sign of the cross, tapping the third eye, down to activating this point that connects the heart, and it's the meeting point of these other pyramids that they already spoke about, and then going over and tapping lung 1, the entry point, where this Po, where your soul, your essence in this lifetime resides. I just think it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And so they can continue to say now, and this is the quote, they say, there's a crossing of the hemispheres of the body. And what we sent to you as a great tapping is self-treatment to calm the mind, to link the heart, and to unify the left and the right so you can receive spirit and revitalize this existence. Has become complicated and subjugated with the words of the Holy Trinity and all that the major religion has done. While this is hopeful for some of you, the hierarchy and removing you from the direct communication with us is ultimately disempowering. And the making the sign of the cross out of deference and humility, it misses the point. We gave this symbol to you so that you can recognize your own godliness, so you can activate your own energy to receive us, to realize that you are us, and to be free and not enslaved. They continue, yes, we are talking a lot about geometric shapes, and their simplicity is very easy to dismiss. Those who aren't ready to intake the message will dismiss it as some hippie stuff or whatever. Don't be alarmed. Instead, start paying attention to where you see the sacred geometry. Look beyond the obvious and discern what we were teaching. These are power-up visions. These are unifiers and connectors. Utilize this order and symmetry to create environments that support transcendence. Having haphazard surroundings can more easily lead to haphazard energy fields. Everything is a fractal within a fractal, so don't get too hung up on one or the other. Keep descending inside and you'll arrive outside. Go far enough outside and you'll end up inside. It's fun how we did this, isn't it? You meet another to meet yourself, and you meet yourself fully, and you know everyone fully, including us. That was the end of that particular download as it related to the sacred geometry, but they continued in this particular one where the night before I had had a very, very intense dream. And they continued here to say, last night you dreamt that there was a battle for your soul, and you woke up saying it over and over again. The battle is really for your attention. Your soul can't belong to anyone. It just is. But the battle for your attention is very much real. You must guard your attention if you want to be a greater conduit for the people. Keep making space and time for us, and we'll show you. You're doing good. And now stop needing us to tell you that. Oh, shit. This life is crazy. Anyway, I hope that the acupuncture points here weren't too confusing. If they were, let me know what your experience is. I know that a lot of you are probably already having experience with sacred geometry. Maybe you've used some of this and explored some of these concepts. If there's somebody that I should try to get on here to talk more about it, let me know. Like I said, I like to have more experiential stuff before diving too deep into what other people have talked about it. But it seems like the geometric patterns is the way to go to help bring some harmony and peace and healing back to you. So if you have access to an acupuncturist, maybe you can share with them some of these points and maybe they'll do it for you. You can start applying some essential oils to these points as well. Frankincense is great. It's a very strong connecting one. Rose oil is also very good to help open the heart. I would suggest putting rose oil on the Ren 17 point, putting frankincense on kidney 26, and allow those polarities of the yin of the rose and the yang of the frankincense to connect. And let's start using this stuff and encouraging you to create that time and that space to allow yourself to tap in, to dive in, so that we can all start sharing more messages of a higher frequency. So I don't know, just trying to figure all this stuff out. As always, thank you guys so much for being here. Keep the feedback coming. Let me know what I can share with you to help support you to live a good life and to have ultimately a little more pleasure, a little more fun here. So thanks for checking it out, and I'll see you guys next time.